Hey everyone, and welcome to my review for House of the Dragon Season 3 Episode 4, Tumbleton. And once again, we have a pretty good episode. So far at least, Season 3 has been a pleasant surprise compared to Season 2. It's not perfect of course, and like always, I wish they would stick more closely to the books. And I would never compare this show to the early seasons of Game of Thrones. But given how low my expectations got after the last season, this has been a serious improvement up to this point. So let's get right into the positives for the episode, starting with Rhaenyra deciding to allow Orwyle to remain Grand Maester and finally starting to expand her small council with Torrhen Manderly as Master of Coin. Again, this is very different to how it happened in the books, where Orwyle was imprisoned and replaced with Rhaenyra's Dragonstone Maester Gerardus, while she made Lord Bartimos Celtigar the Master of Coin, who successfully replenished the Queen's coffers at the expense of their popularity, enacting many unpopular taxes that saw him hated by the smallfolk. Then there was Torrhen Manderly, who in the books was a loyal warrior sent with his brother from White Harbor to fulfill the agreement made with Jacaerys to support the Queen in the Civil War. There were a few more good decisions I thought Rhaenyra made, like looking for past correspondence with Ormond Hightower to learn all she could of him, and her inquiries into the faith of the Seven and their relationship with the Hightowers since they're all from Old Town, wondering if the faith is controlled or might have a bias toward the Greens. And accepting Alan Valerion on her small council, as he seems to have a good head on his shoulders and is knowledgeable about ships, making him a decent temporary master of ships and replacement for Corlys. I enjoyed Alicent's role this episode, as she's basically been politically sidelined and is under house arrest, but still acts like an advisor to Rhaenyra, who comes to her for information and counsel. I also like Alicent's self-reflection that sending Daeron away was perhaps the most motherly thing she's done, since that gave him the chance to grow up a Hightower instead of a crazy Targaryen. Then there were the sad adventures of Aegon and Larys in Rook's Rest, where Larys is doing all he can to keep them alive, coming up with the clever lie about hailing from Sharp Point to explain Aegon's burns, while the Green King still has a difficult time accepting reality, making everything worse until he's forced to kiss the muddy boots of the so-called Lord in charge of the castle ruins. And the last positive I'll mention here was that it was pretty interesting watching Criston and Gwyn enter Harrenhal, where we learn Alice Rivers has successfully hidden away Aemond, likely keeping him for her own purposes while lying to the others about him leaving and informing them Rhaenyra's taken King's Landing. Moving on to the negatives, I'll start off with some of the poor decisions made by Rhaenyra, or the good but obvious decisions she only made when someone else suggested it. Like when Orwyle suggested she send her Riverland army to take Tumbleton, and she complimented him like it was some grand revelation or clever scheme as she puts it, when it was the absolute most obvious thing to do. An enemy army took one of her towns. If negotiation isn't an option, then she can send her dragons or send her ground forces. Those are the obvious choices, there's nothing clever or special about this advice, but Rhaenyra acts as though it's something she could never have thought of. Same when she complains about there being so few advisors on her small council, to which the obvious answer is choosing more advisors. But she needs Mysaria to suggest a Master of Coin, and even then it was only so the small folk would have someone to blame instead of trying to get competent people that might help her effectively run the kingdom. Then there was her dealing with the rat situation by bringing in cats, but only when Alan suggested it, instead of trying to solve it herself or assigning someone to deal with it. Another poor decision was how she's treating the dragon seeds, in this case Wolf the White. Not only denying him the favors he asked for, which I admit were rather silly, but also forbidding him from going to taverns and essentially keeping him prisoner in the Red Keep, treating him like a pet she can take for granted instead of a high-value asset. And lastly, I want to mention her deciding to use the money Daemon secured to help the poor instead of paying the gold cloaks. This is obviously a good moral thing to do, but keeping pay away from her soldiers is just asking for trouble. But even so, giving it to the poor might at least win her favor with the people, except that she also sent the gold cloaks to bash people in the streets because of some graffiti she didn't like, which will basically destroy the goodwill she's winning. Similar to when Aegon won the hearts of the people with the loss of his son, only to throw it away when he hanged the rat catchers. Rhaenyra aside, there was one other thing that I'm not sure I liked about this episode, and that was when Criston Cole and Gwyn Hightower discussed their next steps after being told Aemond was gone. This scene was actually pretty good, but the reason I'm uneasy about it is because it's basically the exact opposite of what happens in the books, where the argument is between Criston Cole and Aemond, as Cole wants to bring their forces south to link up with the Hightower army in the Reach, while Aemond wants to stay and fight in the Riverlands, so they split up, with Aemond going off to burn the entire region while Cole marches south, and along the way is attacked by the Riverlands army with hit and run attacks, whittling down his forces until a final confrontation. In the show, they're reversing everything, with Cole wanting to stay in the Riverlands while Gwaine wants to go south. And Cole wants to wage a guerrilla war against the Riverlands army while they march south toward the Reach. The final confrontation that's set up in the books is one of my favorite moments in the entire war, and I'm really afraid that since they're changing the setup, the final battle may not play out the same way. I hope I'm wrong, because it would be a tragedy to change the outcome of the Riverlands campaign. So now let's get into my top 5 moments of the night, starting with Helena recoiling when Alicent wants to touch her belly, suggesting she may be pregnant. This was one of my favorite parts of the episode because it seems like they're finally introducing Maelor into the show, who in the books was the third child of Aegon and Helena and actually plays a pretty important role in certain events by the end of the war. I was disappointed when he wasn't present for the blood and cheese scenes last season, but I guess they're finally mentioning him to set up future events. Moving on to the number 4 spot, I went with Aegon reuniting with what we're told is the corpse of Sunfire, only for him to claim the dragon is still alive. I love this because this is something I've been waiting for. It never made sense to me that Sunfire was dead since he has such an important role to play in the future, so I found it very odd they chose to kill him off so easily. But now it appears that was just to throw us off. Not only does Aegon feel he's alive, but he doesn't seem to be rotting like Meleys, so I assume he's simply comatose or something, and the writers are trying to draw a parallel between him and Aegon, where both are considered dead and discounted only for them to return in the future and seek their vengeance. For the third best moment, I chose Ulf the White reuniting with his friends at the tavern. Despite what may happen in the future, I really like Ulf's character and enjoy seeing him happy and being cheered by the people at his favorite tavern. And of course, now that he's a knight and dragon rider, they all look to him to pay for their drinks and grant them favors. This was a small scene, but it was really good setup for later when Rhaenyra forbids him from returning, basically taking away the one place he felt genuinely comfortable and happy. At the number 2 spot, I went with Daemon finding Rhaena in a cave and bringing back a goat herder's head to protect his daughter. As much as I don't like the Rhaena character or the storyline they've given her, I did like this scene as Daemon seems so desperate to help and protect her, trying to convince her to return with him, and when that fails, finding someone else to blame so Rhaenyra will stop trying to hunt her down. Spoiler alert here, but given what happens in the books with the Nettles character, it seems like Rhaenyra will ultimately learn the truth. Maybe through Mysaria, who clearly doesn't buy Daemon's story. And maybe she'll order Daemon to kill Rhaena as punishment for lying to her, which he obviously won't do, leading to his final confrontation with Aemond. And now, for the best moment of the episode, I chose Ormond Hightower taking charge of Tumbleton. So far, I'm really liking this new character, who in this episode came off like a rather competent and cunning leader. Of course it sucks for the people of Tumbleton that his army's taken over the town and his troops are sleeping in people's houses, but he's been relatively peaceful and decent by not hurting the nobles and giving justice to Hugh's wife's family when she's assaulted by the soldier. Of course, he becomes a bit of a psycho at the end when he makes Darren kill the wife's brother for laying hands on a soldier. But even this made sense to some degree, as he's been backed into a corner now that Aemond isn't coming. So raising Darren as king may be the only path forward, as this'll rally all Green loyalists to his cause, and may bring more soldiers to give him a chance to withstand the assault headed for Tumbleton. And while he's obviously using Darren as a vehicle to attain power, he does seem to genuinely care about him and is doing his best to teach him how to lead. Staying with the Hightowers in Tumbleton, for the best kill of the episode, I went with Darren executing Hugh's brother-in-law to prove himself worthy of the crown Ormond plans to bestow upon him. And for the best line of the night, I chose when Gwaine summarizes their position in Harrenhal, saying, "King's Landing is fallen, Aegon is dead, our queens are both in chains, and we are here alone with a meager army and no dragon. We have the enemy just where we want them." So that's it for my review of House of the Dragon Season 3 Episode 4, Tumbleton. And like I said earlier, this was a good episode with a few scenes I really liked, and I feel the build up towards the first battle of Tumbleton is going well, though it does seem like they may wait until the end of the season to give us the full battle. Overall, I'm gonna give this episode a solid 8 out of 10. But what did you guys think? How did you like the Rhaena and Daemon scene? How do you feel about the changes to Criston Cole's role in the Riverlands campaign? And how do you like Ormond Hightower? Let me know in the comments below, and if you haven't already, be sure to check out my Prelude to the House of the Dragon Season 3 video, along with my other A Song of Ice and Fire videos like the complete histories of Hugh Hammer and Ulf the White, as well as the second Riverlands campaign. I'll link all those and more in the comments below, and remember to watch my regular Sunday lore videos, which will focus on the Dance of the Dragons until the end of the season, along with my weekly reviews for the show. So for now, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Looking for a new world to explore? Why not check out the Heroes of the Nine Realms series by Alex C. Martin, a longtime supporter of the channel. An exciting fantasy adventure based on Norse mythology, Seasons of Havoc, the third book in the series, is now available for purchase. Continuing the epic adventure from Book 1, Fugitives of Helheim, and Book 2, The Frozen God, chaos reigns as realms collide, with dragons, undead, and giant monsters now roaming land and seas, while demons from the underworld run rampant. Broken and dying, Sigurd races toward Asgard with his godly companions who grow weaker and older by the day, facing threats older than humanity. Should he fail, the underworld's queen gets his soul, but Sigurd's struggle is only half the story. In Asgard, his lover Brynhild is forced into a bitter alliance with a young Valkyrie who has every reason to despise her. Bound by bitterness, duty, and bad blood, they're sent on an impossible mission: retrieve a powerful soul from the sea goddess to turn the tide against chaos. To survive what comes next, Sigurd and Brynhild may have to surrender the last remnants of what makes them human. Available on Amazon and Goodreads, be sure to check out this wonderfully imaginative series and dive deep into the Nine Realms. A special thanks to all those who contribute to CivilizationEx, like Warden of the X, Spectral Knight, Lord Commander of the Eternal Legion, Sir Loin, Werebear of the Great North, Sir Elendil of Numenor, and Javenya Targaryen. If you'd like to help the channel, be sure to give a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and click on the links below, or else go to patreon.com/CivilizationEx, where you can gain early access to videos and watch the Patreon-only series, Heroes of Lore and Legend.